Hey guys, today gonna try to cut us a new piece for the front of the main cabinet, and don't pay too much attention to the mess inside there. There's just all my old parts off the cabinet, and I just stuck them in there for a recent LAN party I was having. They were in the way upstairs, so all that's just extra pieces and parts and stuff. But this piece in the front we're gonna take loose, and we're gonna make a new piece that extends all the way from the bottom of the cabinet up to where the new control panel will be, right along in this area. And I haven't figured out yet the exact amount that I'm going to cut off, because when I cut this, I don't know if I'm going to come down a little bit and come straight across like I've said in a previous video, or if I may start from about right here and come down and then go straight across. It all depends on when I calculate it, how high my control panel is going to end up being. And I think I'm actually going to go ahead and build my control panel before I cut this, and then just see how the overall height of the control panel turns out. It'll probably be anywhere between 6 and 8 inches in height, and I want to adjust that so that when it's mounted to this part that I cut flat, that the height at the top of the control panel ends up being pretty close to a standard arcade machine from the bottom of the cabinet up to the top of the control panel. And I've got some differences in, that part that I cut that I've got to take into account, and the rollers that I'm going to put on the bottom is going to add an extra 1.5 inches, 2 inches of height to the cabinet. So I just want to make sure I don't get the control panel with the control setting too low to be comfortable to play at, and I'll figure all that up later. But right now, this piece right here is going to be removed pretty soon, and we're going to cut the new piece out of this piece. This is a 4x4 sheet of plywood right here, and got the flattest piece I could find at Lowe's. It didn't have any warping hardly to it. I mean, there may be a very slight amount, but not much. And we're going to cut a piece that is the exact 2-foot width that the previous piece has. This is exactly 2-foot width, but we want to make sure that it's long enough to go all the way from the bottom up to where the top is. So I want to go ahead and cut it long. I'm just going to rip that sheet down to a 2-inch width, as perfect as I can get it, and just leave the entire length until I come back and do my control panel, and then I'll chop it off to the exact length that I need. But right now I just want to make sure I cut it exactly 2 foot and get the best cut I can. So I'm going to move some of this stuff outside, not the actual cabinet, but the wood and my saw and some stuff. So be back in just a second. Okay guys, we're outside. We've got our 4-foot by 4-foot piece of plywood that we're going to cut a 2-foot section off of to make the new front on the main cabinet. This looks like the prettiest piece of wood to go for the front on this side. You've got a little bit of ink on this other side and a sticker and stuff, but the whole sheet really looks pretty good. But we're going to cut this section away, and we're going to cut the full length of it, and later I'll come back and cut the end off to the length that I need once I make the control panel. But right now what we're going to do is we're going to measure 2 foot across, and we're going to use this piece of wood as a straight edge to make a line all the way across to follow with our saw. And I know this piece of wood is pretty true. I've already checked it with a framing square, and I put it against the side of a couple of my arcade cabinets, and there's no gap, so it's not bowed one way or the other. It's pretty true, so I can use it as a straight edge. If you have a framing square, you can always use it. You just have to use it multiple places across the piece of wood to keep your line straight. Sometimes it's easier to have one piece that spans the entire distance. So the first thing we'll do is we'll measure 2 foot on this side. And try not to let your tape angle. If you can see, keep it about the same distance from the edge of the wood here as it is here. If you have it on down like this, there's a chance you could angle it. I know that's extreme, but any bit of being off that you've got is going to affect if you're true across 2 foot or not. So we're going to go down about 2 foot. Make us a mark here. We're going to go do it on the other side. Okay, now we can take this piece of wood and make sure you're on the true edge. Sometimes a piece of wood might have a true edge on one side and the other side might be slightly bowed or warped. So make sure you're on the true edge of your wood. You want to line it up on your marks on that side and on this side. I want to use a clamp. I'll use a clamp on this side here and make sure your wood's still on your mark. Okay, so we've got the piece of wood in place, it's clamped down. Now this isn't for the saw to ride on, this is for us to make a line for the saw blade to follow. And it's not going to move much, but you want to make sure as you're cutting that your saw blade is staying pretty much on the line. So we just go ahead and press the piece of wood down to make sure it's flush against the piece of plywood. And go ahead and pass across about 2 times. And do the same thing on the other side. Now you can take your clamps off. Now you should have your pretty true line across here that you can follow with your saw. You can come back if you want to with your tape measure and just check it a few distances across here. Make sure the line is passing through where it says 2 foot on the tape measure. And it looks really good all the way across. So we've got our line. That's what our saw blade is going to follow. Now we want to come back and find the width of the base of our saw so that it can follow and cut that line out. And I'll be back in just a second. Okay guys, we've got our piece of wood that we're going to use for a guide for the base of our saw clamped in place in the proper position. If you look closely, you can see the line that I've drawn. There's the mark I made on this side of the wood, and I drew the line across using this piece of wood as a straight edge. And I flipped the piece of wood over because this is the truest edge, and I'm using it now as a guide for the base of my saw to ride against. And that's going to let the saw's blade be exactly a certain amount from this plank and cut dead on this line. And I've checked all the way across to make sure that the blade is sitting in the proper position. And I have the saw aligned. And I'll show you with the blade. We're clamped down over here too. There's our line. And just so you know, saw is unplugged. There's no power to it at the moment. But right here you can see the blade, and one of the teeth is dead in contact with the edge of the line. And you don't want to have the tooth sitting where the width of the tooth is directly on top of the line. You want to have the edge of the tooth at the edge of the line. If you had the far edge over on, let's say, the left-hand side resting on the line, you're going to take off about 1/8 of an inch of the wood that you don't want to. So you want this right-hand side of the width of the blade to just come in contact with your line. So you're cutting away the part of the wood to the left, and it's okay if the width of the blade, which is a 1/16 or an 1/8 of an inch, to be cut away, because you're still leaving the line at the 2 foot mark. So you make sure that your base is resting all the way against the plank, and you can check it, excuse me, I am sliding it, you can check it all the way down, like we can slide this down about midways and stop, and then look back at our blade and make sure that the tooth is still right against the line, and it is. And I've already checked before I made this clip, it's the same all the way across. But just make sure it's really close. It might deviate slightly, but you want it to be pretty close. You don't want it to go off by more than about a 32nd of an inch or so. And right now the saw is at its maximum height, so that the teeth aren't actually going to cut anything if I was to run the saw across. But now we have to set the depth. I'm going to set the saw here at the edge, lift the guard, slide the blade all the way up to where it would contact the wood. And on my saw, your saw may be a little different. there's a wing nut right here, and if you loosen this, it'll let you adjust the depth that your blade's going to go. So we're going to loosen it, and you notice this all can move down now. So that's like the maximum depth of the saw. Hold on just a second, see if I can do this. I don't know if I can do it with one hand. I think I'm going to cut right here. I'm going to set it and come back because I can't do this with one hand. Okay, we've got the depth of the saw blade going to where the tooth just goes through a little bit through the wood. And I'm going to go ahead and leave it on this old support table here because I need to rebuild the top on it anyway. It's got an old piece of oriented strand board on there that's been sitting out in the weather, and the supports around it are pressure treated and have some Thompson's water seal stain on it, so they're fine, but I'm going to replace that top soon anyway. So if I cut into it a little bit, it's not really going to matter. And I'm leaving this full sheet across here to be supported as best as possible. I'm not going to hang it off the side because we're cutting dead in the middle of this sheet and we need a good bit of support. So we're just going to leave it on the table, and it's okay if the blade digs into this old work table some. Okay guys, make sure you've made most of those adjustments with your saw unplugged. Go ahead and plug your saw up. I put a simple knot in here just to keep it from pulling loose during the middle of a cut. Plug it in like that. Some people do it a little different. If you've got a long enough cord on your tool, I've seen some people plug it together like that, and I actually tie the entire thing like that and do it. But you can do it either way. There's probably other tips that guys on here that are really into carpentry could tell you. The way I usually do it though is just the first way I showed you. Just make one tie. Make sure you're plugging it in correctly as far as polarity. And this one doesn't have a ground plug on it. This saw doesn't. I think there may be some that do. And that just, if you're pulling on it, it's not going to break the connection in the middle of a cut, which is actually a little bit dangerous itself. Got you some safety glasses? If you do, put them on. If not, you probably need to get a pair. They don't cost that much. Get the base of our saw against our guide and make sure we got it positioned correctly and we're ready to start our cut. Make sure your base is flush against the wood. Back away from the wood with the teeth of the saw blade just a little bit, and go ahead and start your cut and ease into it when you first go. Makes a lot of dust, so if you have an air hose, portable air compressor with air hose, it helps to clean up. If not, if you have a small hand brush or even a broom, you can clean all this up before you start trying to assemble it with your MAME cab. There's our cut. Came out pretty good without very much chipping. Looks like it didn't stay dead on the line, but very, very close. I'd say that's no more than a 32nd of an inch off. And some places, like as you get on up here, you see it was more dead on the wood, or dead on the line. But it followed the edge of the wood, and the edge of the wood probably isn't dead perfect, but it's pretty straight. Pretty good cut though. Going to get my air hose and clean this up right quick. So hold on a second. Good idea to use these during this process. And even your tripod probably gets something on it, so you can blow it off at the same time. Okay, that's pretty clean. Go ahead and take our clamps off. And our guide. And now we're ready to take this piece inside and see if it lines up pretty good in the front and how it looks on the MAME cabinet. Okay guys, got the new piece in that's going to be the front for the MAME cab. Just got it propped up there showing you that it does fit in between the front like I planned for it to. I'd say that it is maybe just a hair too wide, just a hair, nothing that just a tiny bit of sanding won't fix. So it's probably more like 2 foot and a 1/16 or a 32nd of an inch maybe. And it fit a little tight in here on this part right up near the top. I just slid it in there so you could see it kind of made it up in front of the old piece that's going to come out. But it'll be going all the way to the floor across there. And it'll extend up probably right around this area whenever I chop this off to set the new control panel on. But hold on just a second, I'll take this out and I'll slide it down so you can kind of see it in the position it'll end up being in. So basically it's going to be right there. That's the front of the cab there. But it'll be cut off here where the control panel is going to mount, but that'll make the whole entire front there.